I don't know what I'm going to do with my weekend. I mean, the answer is watch more rugby. But with my weekends now that the World Cup's over, it's been such a brilliant, like, all-consuming tournament throughout the last month and a bit. This has been, I think I described it in the video that went up on the main channel a few days ago, as the World Cup where the world caught up. And it felt like there's a bunch of us who've been following women's rugby for quite a long time. And obviously we can't pretend to be there way back to the, never mind the 91s, but like, I think above.
I was born.
No. No, I was thinking about it though. Even back to like 2010 and that World Cup being the first time kind of it was on TV and, our first exposure to it. And the growth since then and it exploding into this tournament that now feels very similar to the men's tournament, right? It now feels like almost indistinguishable as a fan watching, that you're going like, brilliant, it's a Rugby World Cup.
I think this World Cup was kind of, to a lot of people, proof of what the people who've been watching for a long time have always known it is, if that makes sense. Like, I remember after the 2022 final, when Ruby Tui came out and did her whole speech of, they say no one cares about women's rugby, look at this, we're out here with a sold-out crowd, all of that. And I remember when that happened, I was a little bit pissed off because I was kind of like, not pissed off, but I was just kind of like, oh, is that still the speech that we're doing? The whole thing of like women's rugby is big now. It's not like this small sport that you think it is. It's not, because I thought like you've just pulled off an incredible historic win in an all-timer game. Like, is that not more interesting than the crowd and everything? And the thing is, like, I feel like this World not everybody was of the same opinion that we're beyond that. We're beyond that discussion. This World Cup
think it was different in New Zealand.
It very much was. I think that's a big part of it. That's a big learning I think this World Cup has had as well, because, like for me as well, because in England, they've sold out so many stadiums. Like, there was a point earlier in the tournament where we didn't go to the Wales-Canada game because the game was sold out. Yeah. And we just left it too late to buy our tickets, which is objectively a really great thing. That we missed out for that reason. It's the best reason to miss out on a game. And so, with that in mind, like, time will tell whether Australia and America, their World Cups will sell in the same way. I think
America I'm excited about.
Yes.
America I think's got a real opportunity to explode things in a way I don't think is true of the men's game. Australia, we'll see. I'd be a little bit nervous about.
Yeah, but my point is, like, in that 2022 final, I think what I was thinking is like, no, Ruby, the moment is you rather than it's you and the Black Ferns rather than women's rugby, because like we know women's rugby is great. I think those of us who've been watching for a long time have known it's great. Whereas this was the chance to prove it, putting it in an 80,000 seater stadium for the final and it's selling out flat out and it being literally, it wasn't even like one of those where it's like it's sold out because they've sold all the tickets, but like people aren't turning up and the second-hand tickets you can get for dirt cheap. Like some of those happen, in sports and in live music or whatever it is, like you go to. But with this, it was like that was insanely sold out. Like people couldn't get tickets second-hand 24 hours out from the event, who wanted to go, or Canadian fans or like whatever. And that was really important. That I think is the big legacy of this World Cup is the fact that it was not just the final as well that sold out, it was just so many games. I think a lot of that also comes down to the choice of venues, the choice of double headers to put together, like the timings of fixtures, and some of that is just pure chance.
Yeah, I think that's something that deserves an awful lot of credit when we're looking at this World Cup in general. That it's easy to focus on the final and the opening game, being huge stadiums, selling out, big occasions, and the numbers there. But I think the real standout of this World Cup, because the last World Cup, right, in New Zealand, you saw the final sold really well. The opening round sold really well, but not many people came to the games beforehand. They came for the Black Ferns game, which are the last of the 3 on.
Yeah.
The games in between, people went to watch the Black Ferns games, but none of the others.
Yeah.
The other games were played in front of very small crowds in tiny venues.
Yeah, it was in Whangarei, wasn't it?
Yeah. They're just two stadiums where they played all games back to back. And both of them were just like 2 sets of stands, capacities of like maximum of like maybe 4,000 or 5,000, maybe slightly higher than that, but small stadiums, and they weren't selling those out. This World Cup, the number of tickets sold, right, equates to about 90% capacity selling. And a lot of that is down to, and I think like it's very easy, people take, criticise them a lot. World Rugby, the 2025 board and the RFU have done an absolutely brilliant job.
They've smashed it.
Everything bar scheduling games to clash, which we'll get onto in a moment, I imagine. Other than that, they got pretty much everything spot on. So you look at the choice of venues, matching venues to games was excellent. So they knew ideally which games to play in York as their smallest venue. That venue is really well picked out. Obviously not a major rugby town, but is a stadium of the right size, right? So it generated a great atmosphere for a stadium that is only, like 7,000 capacity. So they could play the smaller games there. And they could get decent crowds in, because people would go like, oh, brilliant, I'll go and watch those. Those games were cheap. They were in a good stadium that generates a lot of noise from quite a small crowd. It was a really, really smart choice. And then the choice of double headers they put together were really intelligent. So generally, all the double headers had either one of the home nations, but not England. So you had a travelling fan base from Scotland, Ireland, or Wales who would make the trip over easily, knowing they'll be there, knowing they'd have a minimum few thousand fans coming over from there. And that would then be paired with one of their games, paired with the likes of Samoa versus Australia or Japan versus Spain. Like games in which are either going to be blowouts, and we know that in advance, or involving two smaller nations that won't have the same level of travelling fan base. Really smartly paired those games together as double headers, meaning that people came for both. Because you're like, oh, brilliant, I'm paying 25 quid to get both games. Yeah, brilliant. So you had huge fan bases turning out for those. Again, the stadiums they assigned those to, putting two of Wales's games in Manchester so people could stay for a week if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Or they were just like cities that are easy enough to get to. Obviously, it'd be easy if they put them in Bristol or whatever, but that wasn't to be the case in terms of just travel from Wales. Yeah. But Manchester's actually a pretty good location if you're putting Wales, Scotland there, right? In terms of like, it's fairly central between the two.
Yeah.
Relatively.
Good transport links in that city.
Great transport links. And obviously getting to Sales Ground in particular is a bit of a nightmare.
Sure.
But good sized stadium for them. Every ground felt packed.
Yeah. And that is it. Like the atmosphere built up in every single one.
Yeah.
And another thing is like, so we started looking at the 2014 tournament for the podcast just before this World Cup started, which we do intend to get back to. Yeah, I apologise for our long wait on that. But that was pretty much, well, up until the knockouts at least, was all centred in Marcoussis, at France's training ground. And I remember them saying on commentary for that World Cup, like, this is a huge deal for the city of Marcoussis, like, because it's great for the economy that you're having fans and families of the players and so on, everybody staying in Marcoussis, which isn't like a huge rugby town, but it's like, they like it there. So it's great that they've got this big event centred around rugby. And then similar in 2022, like, it's huge for Vangaré that they're getting this huge global tournament, like, coming to their city or town or whatever, and that everybody's packed in there and staying in the local area, and there's a real buzz, like even in the midweek, you know, that all of the biggest rugby fans in the world are in that city, you know, or staying within a few roads of each other kind of thing. And that's really great. But the difference for this is this was a really national tournament, that they spaced out the games really well. And I think one thing that I really liked as a rugby fan living in England in a non-rugby town is that they gave those non-rugby towns the fixtures as well. Yeah. You look at Brighton, you look at York, got these, Sunderland getting the opening game. That is not a rugby town whatsoever. Even like Manchester, I know that they've got Sale Sharks there, but it's not a huge place that a lot of people go and
That's one scheduling point though, that that double header on the opening weekend between Scotland, Wales and Australia, Samoa took place in Manchester the same weekend as Manchester Pride and Man City's third home game of the season. Yeah. So that was an absolute nightmare getting in and out of Manchester that weekend. Yes. That's one scheduling nightmare.
Sure.
But that's beside the point.
It will happen.
Yeah. And the other thing is, right, I'd add this in, again, as someone that lives in a non-rugby city in England, I would walk through a shopping centre, walk down the street and see posters of the Red Roses.
Yeah.
Like, O2 did this great job with this like England Meet England campaign where they had Sadia Kabay, they had Sarah Byrne, they had Zoe Oldcroft front and centre on their posters, on their marketing, you know, stuff saying like Zoe Oldcroft, England's captain, your new favourite player or something on them, or like, you know, there's one that said, I remember like Sadia Kabay tackles everything she sees or something. Just have a tagline about who this player is, you know.
Presumptuous to say it's my new favourite player when Gregor Brown literally exists.
I know.
Okay.
But Sarah Byrne's one said Sarah Byrne lifts weights and trophies, which was presumptuous as anything. But
yeah, she's won a few Six Nations, mind you.
She has. It had her like lifting a Six Nations trophy or something. But like that was great, and then the fact that I just saw adverts for tickets for the final at Twickenham, right, were just up around cities where the games weren't taking place, or like go and buy tickets. You know, I saw tickets for like there's games in Northampton as the closest city. Go, you know, travel there. Really appreciate that because it does add to it, right? I remember a few years ago during the Cricket World Cup, which took place in England, seeing as I was getting off a train in Nottingham train station, seeing someone with a bag over their shoulder said like Volunteer Cricket World Cup, and I'm like, oh, that must be soon then. Is that happening in England? Looked it up. It'd been going on for 3 weeks, and we were in a host city, and I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
So the fact that there was stuff up and you could see stuff and you could go like, oh, okay, yeah, that's on.
And obviously it's different for us as rugby fans because it does stand out, you know. There's
Yeah,
a bit of
exactly.
recognition there. But also, like, they did still reward big rugby towns. Like Northampton got a few games.
Yep,
Exeter, like both great rugby towns, you know.
Bristol.
And then Bristol upscaling it to Ashton Gate for the knockouts, I thought was a really smart move.
Yeah.
And the atmosphere there was brilliant as well. And I think one thing that I really enjoyed was like, and that kind of showed this, certainly from a rugby fans' perspective, right? The amount of people that would at me on Twitter, like, deliberately trying to pretend they didn't know what was going on. And like you could tell that they did, whereas a couple of years ago they might have been genuine in not knowing that was happening. Whereas they would do it, like phrase it in a really deliberately obtuse way of going like, haha, yes, of course this Springbok game that you're talking about here. And then you look at their replies and they've done it like 10 times today trying to get a response out of somebody going like, oh, but not real rugby, is it? Anyway, not only that, but like after I finished training on a Tuesday and Thursday, we'd all go into the clubhouse, and me and the men's team, right? And we'd sit down and we'd chat about the rugby from the weekend.
Yeah.
And it's just all women's games that everyone's sat down and watched and enjoyed. And there is no like weird thing where they go like, oh, you don't get this in the men's game, the thing that they do. And there's no like weird, stupid, misogynistic comments or anything like that you half expect, you're half on edge when you've not had this conversation with people before, you don't know that they're into women's rugby, and people who've just gone and watched games, and you know that is the norm. And like the whole thing about like, oh, nobody watches women's rugby, not to, you know, be a hypocrite on what I was saying, like we're so beyond this conversation, but it's like, no, people who love rugby do. If you genuinely love rugby, you will watch the women's game.
There's been a big swing round to people seeing the thing, I think, you know, a bunch of us saw years ago, that it is just rugby.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of forget about the caveat or whatever it is of it's different. And the quality has come up so drastically over the last like 15 years to the point in which it is indistinguishable. Like it's different, and that's great, and I want it to be different, and I love that it's different, but it isn't from a quality point of view. And so the opening weekend, 1/3 of people who bought tickets for the games on that weekend had never been to a rugby game before.
That's mental. That's exactly what you want.
That's exactly what we want, right? So we've seen this kind of growth, both in terms of fans of the men's game travelling across. I watched, I think, 4 or 5 games from the opening weekend of the season, obviously taken out, reduced by the fact that we were at the final on the, you know, on the Saturday. And I think in maybe like 3 out of 4 games, the Women's World Cup came up, right? And people compared it. And like you had Alex Cuthbert on commentary for like Ospreys Bulls, brought up Canada women like 3 times when other teams were running quick ball speed, right? And we saw it again, I can't remember what was one of the Premiership games, I think it was the Saracens Newcastle game, it came up. And it's brilliant. Like, this is what you want, right? It's just becoming a universal reference. And in fact, people were talking about it, you know, at half-time and so on. People going like, obviously we saw the Women's World Cup earlier today, you know, how did this go? How did that go? Or that's coming up later today. We saw these taking place, and like it is increasingly grown to just being, it's just rugby, it's just the same thing, which is brilliant. But also, it is still drawing in this brand new crowd, as well as converting more and more of the men's crowd with every passing World Cup.
That Canada example is such a good one.
Yeah.
Because that is a really influential style of play. It's a brand new style of play.
Yeah.
And the fact that that is a reference point that people in men's rugby may have, like they won't have seen that a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the brilliant thing. There is a question of what comes next. So, look, we've made this point off air a few times that this feels a little bit to me like the last time I want to be hearing the, oh, isn't it brilliant that women's rugby, no one thought we'd do this argument, right? That has been the case for 5 years now, that people have been doing the, oh, look how far we've come. And that
Not that it's ever a bad thing to say.
Absolutely. And it is absolutely legitimate.
Yes.
You think about Emily Scarrett talking about, you know, having all the crowd leave before the Women's International during a double header. Or you think about the number of these players who played in front of 200 people in the PWR in the first couple of seasons, or even less. Obviously, this is incredible. We've got to this point. We should stop being surprised about it.
I agree.
We should stop being surprised that the game is good, that this is selling out, people are going there.
Of course it's going to sell out. It's a brilliant product.
Yeah.
We all know this.
Exactly. And it's now happened once.
Yeah.
They sold out Eden Park. Eden Park is a smaller capacity than Twickenham. Twickenham is 82,000 capacity. They sold it out. They sold every single seat in the ground. This can be done now.
It's the second biggest Rugby World Cup final in terms of attendance ever.
2003.
Including men's. That is men's or women's.
Yeah, so it's huge. And we will see the Red Roses will sell out to Twickenham again before the next World Cup. And it will become normal. These scenes will become normal, right? And we've got to start moving into that gear and just expecting this to happen.
Yeah.
And continue
It's
to
why we've not
continue
talked
to
about it that
support.
much when we've done our
Exactly,
coverage of
yeah.
this. We want to just talk about the
I
rugby.
want to talk about the rugby itself, right? Because that is the interesting thing.
And that's what we know.
Yeah.
You know, it is the rugby, and obviously, yeah, it's very
Yeah, yeah.
Because we've not done the whole play in front of 200 people and then play in front of 80,000 people thing
No,
that
no.
a lot of the people who are rightly making this point have.
Yeah. So that's part of the real excitement around the tournament is the fact that I think this has set us up for it to be normal.
Yeah.
For us to get to a place where England will be the first to continuously sell out their stadium. We'll then see, hopefully, the other Six Nations teams start to scale that up. And this will become where the game is. Because I stand by this, I keep saying this, inside my lifetime, women's rugby will be bigger than men's.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is North America. And a big part of that comes back to this World Cup having Canada perform so well. And that is huge for the growth of the game in that nation. We talked about this a little bit in our video on whether the Red Roses winning the World Cup was the best thing for rugby union. There's a real chance for Canadian rugby to explode in the women's game. Also, it's worth mentioning the USA, because there is a World Cup coming up in the USA. We had Alonamar playing this tournament on a brief sojourn before going off to Hollywood. Or the WWE, sounds like she's turned that down though. And I think it's worth reflecting a moment on this World Cup from a North American point of view.
Yeah.
So, do you think what do you think the impact this World Cup could have been on the growth of the game in the USA with that World Cup in 8 years' time in mind?
If, like, extreme circumstances, if the USA won the World Cup,
Yeah.
right, that would have been mental. And that would have been the most eye-opening thing. They lift the World Cup and they've got Alona Mar, who's already this figure playing
Yeah.
for them. Look at, like, the impact of her personally winning an Olympic medal had for rugby,
Yeah.
you know? Like, it would be that times 10, potentially. You're looking at her becoming like an A-lister at that point, potentially, because, again, not only her, but rugby, like, her, I guess her facing rugby as the alternative to football, the American football that girls and women can have, you know. And we talked about it in another video, but like that TikTok of her talking to a girl and saying, indirectly and saying, like, you can play rugby because we do all the same things that we do in football,
Yeah.
except, you know, girls play it and they play it very well. Actually, we're really good. We're playing this game, whatever. So that is kind of the top end. Like, she could have blown it up and made it, again, similar to what we were saying about Canada the other day, but like a national sport for women and girls in America.
You look at the impact of that USA team being so good in soccer and football,
Yes.
right? And Megan Rapinoe and so on, and the level of star they managed to build there.
Yeah, 100%. But obviously that's an extreme circumstance.
Yeah.
What they have done, I think rugby is bigger in America now for this World Cup than it
Yes.
was beforehand.
Agreed.
I don't think it's like absolutely blown it up and made it this mega thing, despite the fact Alona's been playing.
I think-
and she's been in every thumbnail of every YouTube video.
Yeah. What it is a sign of what can be done.
Yes.
Right? In that we've seen this, like the viewing figures have been, I think, amongst the highest I've ever seen in for international rugby in America. And that's been really solid for those pool games. So
Yeah.
they only played the 3 games. I think, again, there is genuine room for rugby to grow in America in the women's game, in the men's game it's more of a question mark, and the women's been the coattails of the women if it happens.
Yes.
The other area in which I think the game's grown over this tournament is South Africa,
yes.
who are, other than Canada, maybe the story of this World Cup.
Yeah. I think those are two completely different examples. Let's talk about South Africa first before I'm going to pivot back to the USA in a moment.
Okay.
But with South Africa, the way that rugby will best grow is by showing, because it's already a rugby mad nation, showing people how good women are at rugby.
Yeah.
Like, it is literally as simple
And
as
specifically,
that.
the Springboks.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Like, you could have, in South Africa, the rest of the world could be the highest standard, most competitive, every game is a belter, but if the Springboks are shit, South Africa probably won't clock on.
It'll move on.
They're a nation who care desperately about their national team.
Yes.
As we
Very
see time and time
passionate.
again. Yeah. And so having a Springbok team who are turning up and causing upsets, and also critically playing a style of play that's really reminiscent of the men's Springboks.
Yeah.
And we've gone into that in past, like the DNA they're showing between them, the IP of the MOBA unit and so on that Razzie has, coaches going in and being involved in both teams and so on. Really smart. Allows them to both build a team that is strong and competitive and has the best scrum in the competition.
Yeah.
I wish we could see them play against England just to see that scrum battle. Or at least like seeing a chicken scratch between...
Bring in Dan Cole's Rugby Nines idea.
Yes.
Get them to play against each other. There.
So both on that front, but also, and also being very easy if you're a men's Springbok fan to go like, oh, it's the same team, right? We're playing the same way, we're playing the same style. There's new players, they're playing the same kit though, same
We've got
emblem.
Swace, we already know who Swace is, we already love Swace.
Exactly. So like, all you do is you go like, okay, this is Sezahele. She's great. I like her. Oh, this Babalasha. I like her. Malinga. Oh, that's basically Mapimpi. It's easy enough for me to like translate, move a few consonants across.
A rapid winger who scores tries on the edge every time you give her a ball on counter-attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a short winger and a scrum cap. Brilliant. It's so easy to translate across, and that's critical for growing these fans,
I love
right?
that Sir Khaleesi pointed that out when he did his thing, talking through the team. He literally drew comparisons to his team, who he plays with.
Yeah.
And that was great on a personal level of like just saying like, look, you're our team.
Yeah.
You know, and I think he's played a part in this for sure.
Yeah. And then the number of people who, I saw so many comments, people saying like, I'd never watched the Springbok women before, but I'm so invested in this team now, ahead of the quarterfinals, ahead of the game against Italy.
It's only going to grow.
I saw someone saying, I'd never watched women's rugby like 2 weeks ago, but I just cried at this nation this team getting out of the group.
Yeah.
Because, I'm so proud of this group of girls.
It's incredible.
And what we've achieved.
As we say, like the potential for growth in South Africa off the basis of, as you say, specifically the Springboks, but also just the standard of women's rugby being good is incredible. Yeah. And as I say, like for them, for that country, for that nation, I think that's what they need. Is they need it put in front of them and just quietly told, look at this, look how good this is. And they will go, yes, on the quality of rugby alone.
In the middle of this World Cup, there was a scandal in South Africa about the fact that the tickets are massively overpriced because it's the only thing, it is the most popular thing in the country. It's the only thing they probably can charge that much for. So Saru have got incredibly, greedy with the ticket prices, right? And they are charging an absurd amount of money. There'll be an absurd amount of money in other countries where the cost of living is higher.
Yeah.
And yet, in South Africa, where you can buy, a full steak dinner for about 6p.
Yeah.
Instead, a rugby ticket is costing you like £300.
Yeah.
Which is absurd. So the Springbok women also being a cheaper alternative, right? You can sell out. You can go watch the Springbok team. You can spread them around the country a bit more rather than having them play at Loftus and a handful of stadiums that, kind of the go-tos. I don't know. I just think there's like a huge positive to grow this.
Yeah.
And what we're looking at, right, is women's rugby both embracing the bits of the men's game that work and going in its own direction in other ways.
I'm so glad you've brought this up because this was the pivot I was about to make.
Yeah.
It's talking of Alona and the many stars from the game that exist on social media, because I think World Rugby have done a stellar job of leaning into that angle of social media. And that's it. There's so many players in the women's game who love to embrace stuff like TikTok, right? Yeah. Which the younger market that men's rugby union has really struggled to appeal to for a long time has kind of lacked in a lot. That it has kind of gone for older demographics and trying to appeal to that and kind of, I'm generalising here, but frowning upon stuff like TikTok as just being cringe and for young people and not being very good, I guess. Whereas women's rugby instead, I think certainly in this World Cup and World Rugby have really encouraged this, and I love that they've done that. They've gone, no, there are players who will do this, who will do their funny little TikTok dances that the men's teams will never do. And people find that hilarious.
Yeah.
You look at as well as Alona Mar, Georgie Perich-Redding has been a huge star in TikTok in this World Cup. Yeah. Also, Alona Mar's two sisters, Olivia and Adriana, they've been huge throughout this World Cup in terms of promoting it and just doing
getting fan
daft
experience
things.
Across.
Yeah, daft things in England, and that's been really fun. With the two Mar parents as well, have been great entertainment. Not only that, you look at Anna McGann and Eve Higgins, the whole thing with the fleece. Those two wearing a fleece in TikToks and doing all of these stupid little voiceovers that the two of them are doing. Honestly, the amount of fun those two must have had, rooming together, it was hilarious, every single time watching them back. But the fact that they were wearing that funny little Canterbury fleece, and everybody then on TikTok saying, okay, I need the fleece. Canterbury put it on sale and it sold out within an hour.
Wow.
Just because, on TikTok, Eve Higgins and Anna McGann were wearing it and just, taking the piss out of it, essentially. And, again, that is directly showing the money that can be made in rugby.
Yeah.
They are selling merchandise. They're selling tickets. They're selling all sorts off the back of these personalities that we've got in the game. Gwen Crabb from Wales has been brilliant as well. Sarah Byrne from England. A lot of the England team have really lent into TikTok and so on. I saw something with Hannah Bottoman, having lost her voice, and all of the team having lost their voice in the last 24 hours and going to a Lady Gaga gig and with no voice.
So here's a point that I completely forgot to mention there as well. People like us who have been making videos on this tournament, we have analysed every single game analysed may be a strong word for the third place game, but regardless, we've analysed every game, and we've been using match footage for that. And a lot of broadcasters recently have been very difficult about use of match footage and been very precious over that. World Rugby, however, haven't. They have not even been in touch with us this time round. But I just want to say a huge thank you to them, because they've allowed content creators to use match footage as a means of growing the game, of getting people interested and spreading the good word of women's rugby. But it's not just about women's rugby. I think World Cups are the perfect opportunity to grow the sport and get eyeballs on this amazing game that we have chosen to love, and to get other people to fall in love with it. And so I think it's a really great thing for the game that they have not gotten in the way of that, as a lot of people have. I mean, Sky New Zealand have got in the way a lot, and they're the one broadcaster out of the 16 nations that are in this World Cup who were very precious about broadcasting rights and have pulled down a couple of videos on the Black Ferns. So I'm sorry for caring about women's rugby and trying to grow it. You know, I hope you forgive us. But other than them, all of them have been really, really great. And World Rugby, as I say, like, I'm sure this wasn't an easy decision for them to let content creators do what they want with this. And I really hope this carries on through to future World Cups and just future events in rugby. I think it's great that people can talk about it freely and can show what is great about the game through the means of analysis and through the means of footage. So thank you, World Rugby, sincerely. I think this has been a brilliant tournament and you've really played your part. So nice one. Anyway, back to these guys talking.
Like, there's all sorts going on, like, throughout the game that you just... It's not that you couldn't get in the men's game. You definitely could. In fact, I would love to see this in the men's game. Like, more personalities leaning into this kind of silliness off the field. Because if you're silly off the field, it doesn't stop you performing on it.
The problem is that in the men's game, often it just becomes James Haskell.
That is very true. But I think there's a level of self-awareness.
But the thing is, right, and we haven't mentioned him, no one has ever done more for the women's game than James Haskell.
That's very true.
And it is important that we give him his flowers, his roses in particular.
Indeed.
So, okay.
Jim Hamilton, big up as well. He's done a lot during this World Cup.
He didn't even tweet?
No.
Girls, mate.
Yeah.
Athletes.
Yeah, he's probably tweeted about himself,
mate,
though, so fair play.
Mate, Early Kildon caught a ball once. Athlete. We did mention the bronze final. We haven't talked about it at all.
Yes.
Quick mention of the bronze final.
Yeah.
It's fine, wasn't it?
It was good fun.
Yeah, all right. That's the bronze final covered. We've now covered every game. Okay.
Bractosaurus and McGee scored 2 great tries.
Yes, she did.
And France were
Pauline
daft.
scored right in front of us, which was great fun. Pauline was great fun. The other story of this tournament I want to bring up is the minnows, is the smaller nations. So Samoa, Brazil, Fiji obviously got a huge win over Wales.
Yeah, that is incredible.
It's been a really good tournament for the minnows.
Yeah.
That all of them got individual moments of them being the protagonists, of them being the guys. In a way, I think even beyond a lot of men's World Cups, where often I found it's often been our job over recent men's World Cups to be the guy who shines the light on these smaller teams because they're not naturally doing it. And I think something the coverage has done a very good job of is, and look, a lot of the coverage has been extremely Red Rose centric, but outside of that, once they've moved beyond like just bigging up the Red Roses, which isn't necessarily a problem, but it's just like it's led to a lot of the air in the room being taken by the Red Roses.
I agree.
I think a much more even spread of the rest of the oxygen has gone to the smaller nations, which I've really appreciated.
I love that we're not just talking emerging nations here, like the tier 2.
Yeah.
It's the ones who are still in the starting blocks. That they have just a crumb that they've taken from this World Cup. That's all they need at this point in time. We can reassess them in 4 years' time and see if they come one step further. But yeah, you've got to go one step at a time with some of these.
Yeah.
And they've been really great.
Brazil have been pretty open, right? They want to do what Fiji did. And they want to go from first World Cup, we turn up, we have a bit of a laugh. Next World Cup, we come along and we win a game.
Yeah.
And we're not looking to get out of the group, we're looking to win one game.
Yeah.
And that will be huge. And I love watching this Brazil team. This Samoa team were enormous fun and obviously didn't score that many points over the tournament. But what a brilliant laugh they were. What a brilliant... Not a laugh, that sounds patronising. But like what brilliant company they were.
Yes.
Like what a brilliant team to watch they were. I don't mean it in like we were laughing at them. I just mean as in like I really enjoyed spending time with them while they're on the pitch.
And we mentioned this when they went out of the tournament, but the fact that they had so many amateur players who've given up their jobs to even be there, it's just incredible and genuinely inspiring because it shows what rugby can be. You mentioned the coverage there as well. I think that's something I want to talk about from the BBC's perspective, from where we are. That I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that a couple of people I want to shout out on comms, Anna Capelin.
Absolutely
Been
on there.
so
Yeah.
good, such a fun character, and a great analyst of the game as well. Speaking of, Katie Daly-McLean is one of the best analysts in rugby. Every single time I listen to her, I learn something new about the game that I never knew, because she was one of the smartest thinkers of the game when she was playing, and she still is today, and isn't one of those who's just coasted on what the game was when she played it. Like, she fully, like, still innovates, like, just as a brain, and obviously she's a high-level coach, I know, but yeah, and she's
And formed a
brilliant.
great double act with Ruby Tui, who was also super good.
So good.
Very good. Somehow was in the UK for 6-7 weeks without knowing what a meal deal was before
Bizarre.
I explained it to her. But that is one of the most surreal moments of my life. One of my proudest achievements is telling Ruby Tui what a meal deal is.
Claire Thomas, our
Claire
old
Thomas,
mate,
as ever.
we have to shout out. She's just been brilliant. I think has just summed up what makes every single personality at this World Cup brilliant, and I've loved listening to.
And I think, look, there's a word for that. You know, Nick Heath got none of the games, and I think there's a few other commentators, you know, of his ilk who've done a lot of women's rugby and would have deserved a chance to shine, and that's a shame. But equally, I did like having Andrew Cotter there as the BBC's primary. He's their first choice, like first cab of the rank rugby commentator, the men's
sports
Six Nations and
commentator,
so on.
basically.
Yeah, and he does everything. There was something cool about having, same as Nick Mullins doing games in the last World Cup, having the primary guy commentating on games, right? It adds a sense of occasion, being like, this is the guy who would commentate if it was a men's World Cup final if the BBC had it.
Definitely
right?
agree
Like,
with that.
there is something cool about adding that in and being like, we're going to treat the two games exactly the same. And I think the BBC's coverage has been great. Obviously, there was a missed opportunity by them not picking up a show that they almost did. That didn't end up happening, but...
Also, whilst we're here, Alice Soper, I've loved her commentary throughout the World
absolutely,
Cup.
of course.
Her and her partner Bailey, who've done a lot of really great stuff covering alternative angles of this World Cup, let's say. GSR, Good Scans and the Rugby, they've been great. Really consistent output of just really engaging analysis. And they are one of the best, well, they are the best women's rugby podcast that exists, really.
And then For the Love of Rugby's women's pod as well, very good.
So good.
And obviously, you know, I've popped up a few times thereabouts, but
other than that,
with those exceptions, with those caveats, the one on the final, I was so tired. I've been up since like 5 a.m. And we recorded it at like 9 p.m. or something.
Shauna Brown, Ruby Tui, both great fun.
But both of them,
Ben Youngs and Dan Cole really getting into it.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't enough like recent male internationals who have engaged in this, and the ones who have done that, and it not be a big deal. Also, like looking at like Rudy Page as another one, getting Nadine Rose on the podcast to talk about like what can we do with women's rugby in South Africa. Like people like that, it makes such a difference.
And like Alex Cuthbert, Ellis Jenkins popping up as like people who are clearly following it incredibly closely.
People who are used to hearing about men's rugby.
Yeah.
Just instead having the same voices tell them how great women's rugby is. It makes such a difference.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's so many talented people we're not mentioning.
Yes,
here.
100%
I'm sure we can throw some names up on screen and stuff as well.
Yeah.
Other people we want to shout out because like there's just so many. It's been a really good World Cup.
Yes.
There is one question I would ask, which is, what next?
What next? Short term, watching the PWR. And whatever other women's rugby you physically can watch wherever you're located.
I mean, on a fan level, what's next? PWR starts in like 10 days' time.
Yes.
The Six Nations kicks off again next year. There's a bit of a wait before that.
Yeah.
And this rolls on. I think some of the momentum was lost after the last World Cup because it was such a long wait.
Yeah.
And it's making sure that doesn't happen and you get like a real big build up to the Six Nations. From a broader kind of rugby point of view, though, I just mean in terms of like the next World Cup, in terms of the next tournament, how do you build on this momentum? How do you build on this World Cup?
I think it is trying to use some of the, like World Rugby, as I say, have like really clearly been quite tactical in their use of social media, which has been brilliant and so on. I think do the same thing with not in the Six Nations, but the Pac 4. I think, honestly, the Pac 4 is kind of the most important women's rugby competition between now and the next World Cup because you have got 4 of the best teams in there, 4 of the most marketable teams as well. And the Six Nations obviously has, and it's a shame that it is like this, and they can still do it for both because they don't overlap, you know, that it's not mutually exclusive. But they've got England who will run away with the Six Nations, right? The Pac 4, it's got that Canada team, it's got that Black Ferns team, and you can really sell that, you know. And I think that the swing of the Pac 4, that is the rugby competition next year I'm most excited for, men's or women's, is next year's Pacific 4. It's, really exciting. I think lean into that as like, this is an area that we can grow and sell it the same as the Rugby Championship.
Yeah. It's engage with the Six Nations as much as possible. It's try and grow club rugby. It's use the stars you've built.
Yes.
Use Ellie Kildunn. Go, she's playing for Quins this weekend at the Stoop. Turn up and watch her.
Yeah.
Hannah Bottom's playing for Bristol this weekend. Turn up and watch. It's use those stars. It is also, I'd say, from a World Rugby point of view, in terms of organising the next World Cup, you've got to be really careful and try and do the same thing in terms of picking your venues and picking your double headers and so on. The double header thing was a smart move.
It was.
And tying them.
But not overdoing it.
Yeah.
Like they did in the last World Cup.
Yeah. It's not just playing all the games back to back in one venue.
Yeah.
Like do double headers, spread them around the country. Do likewise. They're probably going to find some like proper old school rugby grounds, kind of shoot shield and so on grounds in Australia to play them at as well, because I do worry they won't be able to sell out like as many 20k capacity stadiums.
Yeah.
I think that's an element of this, is like being tactical with the grounds you use so that they're selling out. What you want is grounds is like, I would rather have, right, for the way this tournament will feel in the next World Cup, a load of 12k capacity grounds selling out, rather than getting 15,000 in a 30-seater
Putting
stadium.
everything in the oval.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you want to feel it as an atmosphere, and you want to feel like it's a big event.
Because that's so important to this.
And that's something they got right this World Cup, right?
And everybody who'd never been to a rugby game before in that first round, who will have left thinking that was great because the atmosphere was really good.
Yeah.
Whereas if they went to an empty Murrayfield or something like that, they might not have thought the same.
The absence of the other home nations nearby and the distance, to the closest travelling fans is a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
It allows you to market. It's a bit more difficult to market games to travelling fans. That's a bit of an issue, but what they've got to do is try and build momentum in Australia.
Yeah.
And what we've got to try and do is, I think, the critical thing from a World Rugby point of view, they do this thing with the men's game, where right before World Cups, they have a core of coaches that they send in before World Cups and before qualifying to Tier 2 nations, to smaller nations, to try and bring them up to scratch, to make sure their fitness and conditioning is as close as possible.
Yeah.
That they are drilled on like mauled defence. They are drilled on little things that can lead to scorelines blowing out, so the games are as competitive as possible, right? And they have fitness conditioning coaches that are good enough to be leading the way for Tier 1 nations, working with the likes of Uruguay and Chile and whoever else. They need to be doing that sort of thing for the women's game from right now.
Yes.
Get those coaches in from the next time Brazil are in camp, the next time Samoa are in camp. Get coaches going in and working with those players immediately. And also, do it with everyone that isn't those top 4 nations. Do it with Scotland and Wales and Australia. Like, add some extra funding in there, incentivising this, making sure the nations are spending on this. Because this tournament is going to keep getting better, but there is a real worry that will England just keep getting better and will it become a blowout? And we talk about that at length, so I don't want to talk about it again too much here.
And the whole WXV rebrand thing is obviously, we'll have to see how that is.
But there is also an element of, like, if that's a short-term thing just till the next World Cup, are you, and I know they're planning for 2 cycles, but there's a level of, like, are you just helping bring up the next 6 teams and then the other 6 teams so that you're, I don't know, I don't like it,
We will have to wait and see, though,
we'll have to see.
Works with. Last note I want to end on. Firstly, I realised we forgot to mention Ella Ferguson.
Of course, yeah.
Who has been the greatest
of
all of these, and so unbelievable.
There's so many people we're forgetting.
Yes, there are. And they will all occur to us as soon as we stop recording.
Absolutely.
A few retirements from this tournament. We beforehand paid homage to Nolison Diso Boy from South Africa, who's retired, and Jade Conkle, who's retired from Scotland. Katie Mattinson has also announced her retirement formally, who's been brilliant. One thing I loved about her retirement is that she didn't mention that she played for England. She just mentioned what a great honour it's been to play for Scotland.
Lisa Coburn as well with Scotland.
Yes,
is retired.
Absolutely. And I think some of this is partially inspired by the lack of...
Yeah.
We've now had some information from the Scottish Rugby Union about what they're doing, but obviously they were kept in the dark for way too long a time. And another thing I should say is that there will be a lot of other retirements that I either haven't seen about, haven't been too loudly shouted about, all sorts of things.
Well, like Tyson Becker-Boom, Karen Pack-1.
Yes.
Chance of them making a World Cup, probably not that strong.
Karen Pacan's 38 now.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing this will be her swan song.
I would assume so.
Going at the top of the game.
Tyson Becker-Boom said that she said she was going to retire for the last 3 World Cups, so isn't going to commit to that. Likewise, Portia Woodman-Whitcliffe.
Yes.
Who said publicly after that game that she intends to keep playing rugby for the rest of her life, and said this. I loved it. She said, I don't know if you saw this quote. From her, that there is currently no vets women's rugby in New Zealand, so she's planning to start some teams and start a league, which I love.
That. But also, poor women.
She isn't going to officially retire from the Black Ferns until she physically can't.
Yeah.
She's going to like stay on and she'll make decisions as she goes.
Yeah. So she obviously retired before, came out of retirement for this World
Yeah.
Cup, and she's
So
essentially
it basically made her look a bit silly
Yeah.
coming out of retirement.
yeah.
Same
She's,
as Daniel Day-Lewis said recently.
yeah, she's just basically said like, I'm not going to commit either way, whether
Yeah.
I'm retiring or not. I'm just going to see how I.
But
go.
if this is the end,
If
one
this
of
is
the
the end,
greats.
incredible. And also, just like one thing I think we don't sing her praises of enough, she is the most humble rugby player,
Yeah.
like ever. And all the things that Rohe Demant said about her being like, Rohe Demant's quote is like, the reason why I think Portia's the GOAT is because she's the greatest teammate of all time, and that she's so kind to like young up and coming players, and that like, you know, that she shares the talent that she has with everybody
Yeah,
else,
yeah.
and the gift that she has, and she seems like the most humble rugby player when she has all of the right to be like the biggest arsehole ever and to have like this full attitude about her, because she is, you know, probably the GOAT of women's rugby. And yeah, women's rugby's answer to Jonah Lamu is what a lot of people say about her. And yeah, just the most humble competitor and an incredible athlete.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we'll ever see another player like her, but I really hope we do.
Marley Packer, again, hasn't made an announcement, presumably retiring.
I'm guessing she'll
Likewise-
do a Six Nations like Sarah Hunter did and then call time.
That's fair, yeah. Likewise, Emily Scarrett.
Yes.
Is this the last we'll see of Emily Scarrett? Got a
Yeah.
huge reception when she got her medal. Mo Hunt as well is
Might
older
go to
than
the
people
Lions
think.
tour, maybe.
Yeah.
Because she's still top of game, still starting for England, whereas those other two aren't. Marley Pack is a particularly weird one because she's now second choice open side for England.
Yeah.
And you've also got the likes of Evie Gallagher, of Alex Callender, of Aoife Wafer, competing for that Lions spot, so she might want to just call time on her own
Yeah.
terms. It's a difficult one. Same with Skaz.
Yeah.
But Mo Hunt, as I say, I think she might try and make it to the Lions tour. But
Yeah.
it's a big one. Another one that's been formally announced is Marine Ménager, legend of French rugby. So consistent
Yeah.
as a centre or as a winger, and captain them at this tournament, has gone out at the top of her game. And again, has been just such an entertainer on the rugby pitch for years and years.
Also potentially looking at Agatha Gerard as well.
Yeah.
Said she's thinking of retiring, but isn't certain. But again, what a servant for France.
She will get to the end of the Six Nations and she'll come up against Amy Cockayne and she will end her career how she wants to.
For red card.
Right
yeah.
hook, red card, lengthy suspension that she wanted, put her feet up, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Go off to coach in the Pro Day Dar
Yeah.
as a smoking and punching coach. The most in-demand coach in Pro Day Dar history.